All right, so I wanted to share some stuff that I've been doing with Lioranboard. If you don't know what it is, it's a software or software that you use to control things that happen on your OBS, either through commands, what you type, through Twitch, through hitting the buttons, whatever. There's a lot of stuff you can do with this. All right, so this is just one of the many things I've been working on. Some of these I've had a real hard time doing, and had to think outside the box. Like especially with this one I'm going to show you, which is basically a pseudo queue system. Like the other way I thought of it was just not working, and it was very convoluted. This is super simple, and it does exactly what I need it to do. All 6 of these buttons are my backgrounds. I made these before I realized I can condense all that to one button. But the thing is, all those things that have to be resized fit exactly where Pepe is, and then put it into that single button. So that way you change it from one source instead of having multiple sources on your OBS. So you can just have one. I do that with my layout. I'll show that in another video. So, and these 3 buttons could also be condensed to one, but I do it this way because it's just easier for me. And it's going to be it'd be a little bit more difficult to put that into one button anyway. All right, so this splits trigger is what triggers this button, and this button triggers this button. This is the timer, clearly. Okay, so in here, currently I have this set to skip if my value's above 7. I'm gonna want this if I'm gonna have to figure out how to code this to where if as long as it's not 127, anything outside of that should not trigger this, because currently, and pretty much any number value that happens can trigger this button. And if people can screw other people over, can add more to the timer. So I gotta figure that out. I just made this, so if you have any questions, like if I ever come to a resolution on this, I'll let you know how to do this. Okay, so BG val, background value, just a way for me to understand. You want to make these the variables. You want to make them in pretty layman terms, so that way everybody understands just by looking at it what it is. Because if I just made it like background value number it equals whatever, like initiate, like people aren't going to understand what that is. Anyway, so this value of 2, what I'm pulling is the message that somebody leaves when they claim the channel points. And making this true makes it a number value. And if you make it false, it makes it a string. So if you make it into a string, it's always going to come back as 0 if you try to pull it as a value like I am here. You got to make it true, so that way it pulls the number. And most of the time, people are going to listen to the description of the button and put the number corresponding with the background in there, and you don't have to have any problems. They're not going to put 0. They're not going to put 20. Whatever. And plus, people tend to not want to waste their points anyway, so I doubt many people are going to be screwing around with it. But that's another story that we can fix that later. It'll fix that later. But unfortunately for them, if they don't pick that number, they're just going to lose their points, because this is not going to work, or that's the plan anyway. Now, I could make it to where if it is greater than 7, just send them a message, be like, you just wasted your points. I can do that. I just haven't done that yet. So what it does is it triggers button 0. This is the ID of that button. If you want to find that, you right click the button. Down here at the bottom is the ID. That's the button I want to trigger. Okay. And if you put any sort of delay on any of these commands, and they go to reloop, like a redo if, or just loop in general, it only does the delay one time. And if it loops again, it's going to have 0 delay until that button is repressed. So don't use a delay unless you know it's only going to be happening one time. And so this is the queue. This is the pseudo value we're using queue up. How many backgrounds are waiting to be happening. You can do this with anything. It doesn't have to be backgrounds. It could be your layout like mine, which I'm planning to put the same thing on my layout. I just created this, so there's a little bit of fine tuning to be done, but for the most part, it works exactly how it should. And so that way people can't just bombard the chat points or channel points and like keep changing the background on somebody. You know, it's like I want Pepe, and then the other guy doesn't want anything, and then he does that back to back to back to back, and he just constantly ruins it for everybody else. So that's what this timer's for. Sorry about the hiccups in the recording. For some reason, I can't change my encoder to my GPU for some like whatever reason, and my CPU, I don't know why, but it just can't always handle it. So if the Q is greater than equal to or greater than 1, it's going to skip this value of the Q timer, which is our seconds. And I'll just re-explain this in case I didn't, because I kind of went on a tangent. Q is how many people are in line, and it's equal to how many minutes are left on the timer. You can do this in any time interval, but 1 minute, super simple, because it's easy to explain and it's easy to equate. All right, so Q timer, seconds, and once this hit, whenever this hits 0, it goes to the next layout, etc. So if this is less than 1, which means it's 0, it skips doing all 4 of these, which is to send a message stating like how much time there is. So basically, it's to not send a message saying you gotta wait 0 seconds for your thing to happen. There's no point in that. So I just don't have it send at all. I mean, I could just make it to where it says, you know, your layout was initiated or something. It just seems silly because that'd be the only reason why. That'd be the only message for that whole thing. Is just for that reason. And so I just leave it blank. So if the Q is less than 1, it's going to display only the seconds. Okay? And remember, the Q is the minutes, and the Q timer is the seconds. And then if the Q is greater than 0, is 1 or higher, it will display the minutes in seconds. And of course, I have the S in brackets, so that because like I'm not gonna know if it's gonna be 1 minute. I mean, I could specify 1 minute and leave that S out, but that's just another 2 command lines for no reason. And then Q, you want to add 1 to it, so it's always gonna start at 0. So when it adds 1, it's gonna be 1, 2, etc. And then the splits timer, Q timer, if it's not 59, it's going to skip. It's going to skip this, start the timer. So what we're doing is starting from 59, going down to 0. The reason for this is so that way when it's printed out to the people, to the chat, they'll see it as the exact seconds counting down. You don't want it to go 0 to 59 because then they will be confused. It won't make sense, etc. And then we're going to redo this whole thing, these 2 spots here. Like these 2 aren't being redone, just these 2, right? Now this this is likely not necessary the way the code's set up, but it's better to have it anyway. It's a redundancy. It's kind of like a failsafe. If it's less than 1, it's going to redo these 2 to 0. And then the Q timer, if it's greater than 0, the Q timer will be 59, or a skip if it's greater than 0. Sorry, if it is 0, they'll make the Q timer 59. So that basically just kind of wraps around to start it again if it's required, meaning there's a Q still. And then on this, but the trigger, we actually have a Q on the trigger. This one does not. This one gets queued, and that's purposeful and that's required for this to work. Because if it doesn't get initiated again, it can't start the timer again, and then it just won't work because if the timer doesn't start, the background doesn't change. So the background here, again, I'm pulling this again. Now that I have changed something in the trigger, this actually made sense to put over there. So again, we're still pulling the message. Full VG, full background. This is just an arbitrary value, 0 and 1, just basically to tell me, or tell the code whether it should be running or not. So if full VG is 0, it runs the entire code. And then redo if Q timer is greater than 0, not 0, it will redo this button ID, which is the timer. So anytime the timer is above 0, it's going to constantly push this button Okay, and then if this isn't queued to be be hit again, the timer will stay 0 until it's queued again, and then it'll hit that button and starts the timer again. So once all your queue is done, the timer is always going to be 0. And then if the queue timer is equal to or less than 58, I would put this to 59, but for some reason it doesn't work. Maybe because 59 happens too fast. Not sure, but it shouldn't matter. It's all 60 seconds. If it's we're gonna skip every step after this. If it's anything less than 59. Oh, that's why. Okay. My head can't think. Okay, so if it is 59, it's gonna do these things. If it's less than 59, it's not. The reason why that confused me is because I normally put less than 59 instead of equal to or less than 58. It's the same thing. It's just it didn't work in my head reading it back. I'm kind of tired. So if the poll BG, which again is to tell the timer or tell this script to happen or not, if it's 1, it ends it. We want this before anything that's actually going to affect the background or whatever thing you're doing. So that way it cuts it off when it's ready to cut off. And then these are all the backgrounds. They're calling different buttons, all the ones I showed you before. And then we want that Q value to go down by 1 once this runs course. So that way we know the Q has dropped. And then pull BG equals 1, and then it ends, like once it gets back to the top. All right, and so the Twitch trigger, so splits background, and this is a wildcard. So they can type anything in there, and it will trigger this button. If the value is not what I set inside of the button here, which I should have probably gone over, it won't work. It won't do anything. So if it's not 1, it's not 2, 3, etc. So I don't remember what I labeled, what exactly which buttons is which. The point is, if so, 1 is for Pepe, 2 is for Hypnotoad, etc. And as long as those aren't designated to this button, it won't do anything. They can still claim it, but it won't do anything. That's up to them. If they can't read the description of your channel point redemption, that's on them. They can lose their points. Most people don't want to lose their points. And so basically that's just telling the code, which button needs to be done for whatever reason. So if it's not 1, it's just not going to do it. Or if it's not 2, etc. And then again, Twitch trigger, we have the same thing, but we're not adding it to the queue. We don't want to add this to the queue because this won't work anymore. And so again, the wildcard, just to make sure it triggers. I tried just having this one trigger with the splits background and made this just nothing. It doesn't work. Like the only reason why I would do that is just to make sure it still gets added to the queue, but the button just doesn't work if you do that. So you want to keep it whichever channel point redemption there is. So you'll see on the left, my chat there, and I'll redeem this button. So Hypnotoad is 2. Change to Hypnotoad. You see the queue timer is going. The queue is 0. So that means it's currently 50 some odd seconds before the next one changes. Right? Claim 3, and it's not working. All right, let me try. Oh, the queue's working. The message isn't. It could be something I did. All right, so because that's new, something I did in the receiver. So we'll go ahead and change that real quick. I'm just gonna change this out. This should not be affecting this, but I think it is. It doesn't make any sense why it would. All right, so let's try again. A good chance this is not 0. Yeah, but we'll still try it anyway. Okay, let's go ahead and reboot receiver. I didn't go through testing that command, so it should work once this connects. That's the only thing I changed. So yeah, see Pepe changed. Pepe, back to Hypnotoad. you see the queue went up by 1. So now it's 1. You're waiting 54 seconds. So what this is it's sending the message before it adds to the queue. So that way you see exactly what it's supposed to be. So if I add the queue before this, it would say he'd have to be waiting 1 minute 54 seconds. When it's actually 54 seconds before the next one gets triggered. So then I got Ricardo. That's 1 minute for that one, 2 minutes for that one, etc. So it's going to post to your chat how long it's going to be before their redemption happens. And you'll see once this hits 0, it's going to go to Hypnotoad. In case you're wondering, it's this thing right here, timer. 0, Hypnotoad. Actually, technically hits 59, and then goes to Hypnotoad. And this will just keep repeating until this queue goes back down to 0. And once it's 0, it will stop doing the redemptions altogether. Now, one thing with this is if you got like a really spammy type of chat, this might not work completely well because it's kind of buggy with the message. It seems like if it gets spammed too many times within a certain time frame, it will stop for a while and then eventually it'll start working again for sending the Twitch messages. It's a small bug. It doesn't it's after like a handful of minutes before it starts getting all wonky. I'm not sure what it is yet, but for now, like, this should work. As far as I know, I tested this with just the message itself and it still froze, so it has nothing to do with my code. But yeah, this is just kind of a neat thing you guys can do with Lioranboard. And I'm sorry this was so long. Hopefully I explained everything really well. Hopefully you guys can replicate this, do some cool stuff with it. I just figured I should put this information out there because I don't see it anywhere. So hopefully you guys do some great things.